and Katrina's anniversary is coming up this week too.
And of course, Josh Morgerman.
Oh yeah, our favorite. We couldn't do this without him. Josh, how's it going this morning?
Real good, real good. Second cup of coffee, getting going. I feel able to go on TV and talk now.
Well, no, that's good because that first cup I realized is just kind of getting you going, getting
Knocking
the
the
juices
cobwebs
flowing.
off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basic human functions, not quite TV level at the first cup.
Yeah. Be able to drive functionally.
You know, we were actually joking a little bit earlier on before we were actually on this that so we're breaking down the tropics today, and I said, what, do we need about 30 seconds?
We can find things. We can find things to talk about. I promise you that out in the Atlantic and the Pacific. It is, what in the world are we doing out in the Pacific now all of a sudden? It feels like every day we've got another system to watch or another area.
Kind of, but listen, the Pacific, believe it or not, is well below normal. In fact, the Western Pacific, where they get typhoons, that's the world's breadbasket for tropical cyclones. They are 45% of normal right now. So it's dead, across the globe. And actually, that's what's so interesting. Not just the Atlantic, but just kind of like all of the basins in the Northern Hemisphere. It's just, they're kind of, since Aaron, it's just, there's little things here and there, but not like normal activity.
And the more I look at things, and I need to knock on wood and things, because it's not like we're complaining. This is not, bad, but it's just strange. We're moving to the peak of hurricane season. And even modeling is looking at it saying, there's not much at the moment.
Yeah, it's true. As kind of like a hungry hurricane hunter, I look at the operational models, the sort of the ensemble models, everything, and it's all just dry. This is like going to the dentist and he's like, "Hey, you're good, no cavities, nothing to worry about." It's like if you hate hurricanes and you live on the U.S. East Coast or Gulf Coast, no cavities right now, nothing to worry about. Looks pretty clear.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Going to the dentist is definitely definitely how we feel.
Actually, let me clarify. Watching us in the morning is not like going to the dentist. It's like having chocolate cake in bed.
I've been compared to a root canal many a time. Believe you me, being on in the morning, this early in the morning for sure.
I got nothing. I don't know. I don't even know how to follow that up. We got a minute before we go. But hey, by the way, this is your chance, our friends, social media friends. You've got your questions. Some of the questions might include, why is this happening? What's going on? Is it going to change? Or you can complain about anything you want to complain about also.
Yeah, sound off by all means. X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're monitoring all the comment sections. And of course, we've got meteorologists downstairs that might be able to help us answer some questions as well.
Yeah, so we're gonna keep you updated on all those things, and we love the interaction too, because it is fun. I love the questions, especially the surprise questions that come from you. So we're gonna be jumping over onto the TV side, so you just have to stay right here, unless of course you want to watch us on television at the same time as well. And then we're gonna bring in the TV people, and we'll be back with you in about 10 seconds right now. Good morning. Welcome to Weather Nation. I'm Dr. Jim Siebert. We're going to be talking tropics. This is our hurricane hub today. You want to join us on our social media platforms, click on the QR code right now, because that will give you the opportunity to ask us questions, to interact with us, to complain about the weather. If you want to complain, that's okay too. Joining me right now is Kevin Schneider, and we have been talking for the last a couple of hours actually, trying to prepare for this. Plus, our own Josh Morgerman, our favorite hurricane hunter, is here today, and we're talking all things tropics.
And of course, we've got Tracy Anthony, not via West Palm Beach. She is in studio. She's going to be giving us some updates here as we go throughout the next hour as well.
Yeah, so we're going to have lots of fun. So let's get to Josh, and let's start breaking down what's been happening. So Josh, first of all, let's do a little bit of backing up a little bit. Let's talk about Aaron and kind of what happened, what you saw, kind of lessons that we learned from it.
Aaron, so far the big headliner of the season in the Atlantic, really the only significant system, and a very significant system, became a Category 5 and was like one of those sort of African long trackers, one of those storms that produces what we call a lot of ACE, a lot of accumulated cyclone energy. Because of Aaron, technically right now we are having a slightly busier than normal season in the Atlantic, but it doesn't feel like it because it was all Aaron. And the great thing about Aaron was that it took the perfect track. I know probably folks on the Outer Banks of North Carolina don't see it that way because you had some serious like flooding and beach erosion, but Aaron basically avoided every landmass in North America as it field gold between everything and took a fortunate path. If it had been a couple hundred miles further west, it would have been an historic storm.
Yeah, and even Bermuda got missed on this. I mean, it was just one of those things that it was almost uncanny how it was able to miss every single landmass.
Yeah, Aaron was just, kind of like a shy one, just didn't want to interact with anyone. And yeah, that was a good thing. It did like a field goal between the Outer Banks of North Carolina and Bermuda, and then it cut east very sharply, so it avoided Atlantic Canada. So no one got it. And then the remnants of it kind of went into the United Kingdom, but by then it wasn't much of a big deal, just like a big low pressure system.
Well, now, and when we say it didn't impact so much as far as making landfall, it definitely had a big influence on the Outer Banks and some areas along the East Coast.
Absolutely. And Aaron's a great example of how, you don't need a hurricane to make landfall to have big impacts. Now, the violent, intense core of a hurricane is quite narrow, but the system overall is quite big. And there can be some major peripheral effects, especially when you have a system like Aaron, which not only was strong, but was also actually a very big system, had big wind radii. The hurricane and tropical storm force winds extended very far from the center, and also the dangerous rip tides and swells and everything else. And the Outer Banks of North Carolina really, really felt it. I mean, some of that coastal flooding was quite serious. It's surprising how far away the hurricane actually was.
Yeah, it really was as far as those impacts. All right, so that's what's happened with Aaron. Let's talk about the current tropics. I mean, we have Fernand out there, and that's about it at the moment.
It's just incredible. Now, we were watching Invest 99L all last week. The computer models always hated this thing. They always, whether you looked at the deterministic models or the ensemble models or the hurricane models, they all just said, get over this thing. It's not going to happen. And we all were watching it because that convection was really fighting as it went into the Caribbean. It looked like it was like trying to stay on. It looked kind of interesting. Well, the computer models were right. The thing just totally kicked the bucket. Went into Central America. That thing is off the map. And now when you look at the computer models now, out some ways, like a week or two, there's just kind of nothing there, nothing to talk about. It's really a clean bill of health if you hate hurricanes.
When we are talking, all of our meteorologists, when we get together here, we talk about the long range models, and I say, okay, I don't want to, sorry, I don't see anything happening. We're going about September 11th, 12th, 13th, which really just seems odd.
It does, but I want to caution everyone. We all have very short memories, myself included. But I'll tell you, another recent season that was exactly like this was 2022, just a few years back.
Yeah.
We had a completely dead August. There was nothing in the Atlantic, literally no named storms. And that was the year that brought us the historic Category 4 Hurricane Ian, which was a devastating generational storm on the west coast of Florida. And we also had other big hurricanes that didn't impact the United States, like Fiona. So late September came back with a real roar in 2022 after a dead August. So the message here is don't let your guard down.
Absolutely.
Always good advice, and it's one of those things you always want to be prepared, right? As we go all the way, you want to be prepared before we get into hurricane season. But of course, we wanted to talk about staying prepared as well. We got a question, Josh. Do you ever get a first aid kit from your go bag there?
I'm very naughty. I do not carry a first aid kit. I absolutely should. I prepare in other ways by being in good physical and mental shape and being up on all my vaccinations and everything when I'm traveling abroad. But no, I do not travel with a first aid kit. I know I'm very naughty and I'm going to get heat for saying that.
Yeah, no kidding. I absolutely understand that. We're going to get a quick check with Tracy Anthony on what's happening on our radar across the country before we go to break.
Hey guys, yeah, this morning we are tracking a few isolated storms once again across parts of Oklahoma, but the big area of focus is going to be the Four Corners. The Colorado Front Range is where we do have that threat for strong to severe thunderstorms later on in the day. They had storms yesterday, going to be impacted once again today. Stick with us here on the Hurricane Hub and always make sure you join us on social media. We want you to interact. We want to answer your questions. Just scan the QR code to join the conversation.
All right, Jim, I think I messed the end of that hit up, didn't I?
You know, it's funny. When
Wait on me.
So every now and again, as we're wrapping things up, we'll get some instructions.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it gets mixed up.
Hey, you know,
it happens.
that's all
It happens to all of us. But let's go back to the question, because it actually was a really good question. I
Yeah.
think we could spend a little bit more time on this. So let's pretend like it didn't happen. What was the question again?
So it was for Josh. It was on X from I'm gonna go Plocola. Did you ever get that first aid kit for your hashtag go bag? The nurse in me couldn't let that go, Josh.
Yeah, I love how you're making me answer this question again when I was embarrassed about the answer the first time. And now it's
Feet
like
to the fire, buddy boy.
You're shaming me on like live TV. Thank you. So no, I don't have a first aid kit. I should. It's one of the sort of the rules that I break when I'm out hunting. I should, but I do sort of. I am medically minded in the sense that I am in good physical and mental shape when I go on my hunts, and also I stay up on all my vaccinations and things, which are important when you hunt abroad. So I am sort of medically minded in that way, but no, I do not travel with a first aid kit. I should, and I'm probably going to pay for it. So maybe this is my wake up call, being embarrassed on TV.
Well, it's not as easy when you say first aid kit. That can mean a lot of things, right? So it's not like you're going to carry a giant pack full of bandages and a bunch of stuff, but some little things might not be such a bad idea. I agree.
100%, like the kinds of things to, for example, treat like a, kind of a puncture wound or a scrape, just the stuff to kind of quickly disinfect it, because, there are various bacteria that can be very dangerous. Actually, right in the Gulf Coast, we had a death from flesh-eating disease in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, just a couple of weeks ago. Someone scraped their leg on their boat and they died a month later. So this is a serious thing, especially down here where we have warm water.
I actually was worried about that a lot in Texas, because I'd go fishing and things. Well, you get a little scrape, you got to put hydrogen peroxide or something on that quick, simply because of all the little bacteria that could be really bad.
That's incredible.
So,
I wouldn't even think about that.
Oh,
just going around some seawater. Hey, we want to bring Tracy Anthony back in here and touch on radar again. I know, Tracy, we don't have a ton going on necessarily, but where's some of the heaviest rain looking like it's at?
It's going to be out west, and you guys are going to have to bear with me. I'm new in this studio, or new returning, and I'm getting used to what I have. I should have probably put heels on, but we're running with it here with the tennis shoes. But yeah, out west, that's where we're going to have the best chance for rain showers and storms. We're tracking showers and storms this morning, and we even have a few flash flood warnings already. So we have one across parts of New Mexico. So this is just northeast of Santa Fe. And then we're also tracking one that is in southern Utah. So we are expecting rainfall rates that could be up to 1 to 2 inches per hour. So that's pretty significant for this part of the country. And we have excessive rainfall outlooks that have been issued throughout the entire week. So you guys, it's just that monsoonal moisture that's going to continue to impact the west here. And, I know the tropics is a relatively calm and quiet, but it sure seems to be active here across the lower 48.
There's always something going on, right? I mean, you could find something somewhere in the country, or you go out, up to Alaska or to Hawaii. So there's always something. Hey, Josh, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on with the sea surface temperatures. Again, we're looking at all these different little signs about how's it going to explode back into normal activity again. And I think one of those things might just be the sea surface temperatures.
It is that is one of the most important factors with hurricane development are the sea surface temperatures. Now, what's interesting is the sea surface temperatures across the Gulf, in the Caribbean, and the tropical Atlantic are mostly above normal. That map you were just seeing there, that's an anomaly map, meaning it shows the deviation from normal. Warm colors means it's warmer than normal. Cool colors means it's cooler than normal. And you can see that formation area, the Gulf, the Caribbean, the tropical Atlantic is mostly above normal. But look at that big blue swatch off of the east coast of the United States, that big blue kind of gash going sort of north in the Atlantic. That is what's called a cold wake. That is left by Hurricane Erin. As a hurricane goes over the ocean, it churns up the water, and that warm water on the surface kind of gets churned down, and the cold water or cooler water underneath gets churned up. And that's what happens. That's called a cold wake. Now that'll recover in a week or two. That'll be gone. But right now you could see that it really is sort of evidence. It's Erin's fingerprints or its footsteps of where it went.
It's one of those signs too, when we watch an actual storm move through a region, that it stirs up the water, it changes things briefly. But as you mentioned though, it does go back to normal, meaning back to that warm water.
Yeah, absolutely. It is going to recover, so folks shouldn't think it's going to remain like that. But look at the Gulf. The Gulf is untapped. There hasn't been a whole lot going on in the Gulf, so there's no churn anywhere there. And you can see that those warm waters, it's like fuel that's been saved up and it's ready to use. But, sea surface temperatures are not the only factor. I think there's a misconception. You see it on social media a lot. People think that hurricanes are just simply the only factor involved with formation and intensification is sea surface temperatures, and that's not the case at all. Other factors have to be in place, and those factors are not in place right now. It's like having a lot of fuel, but you don't have a car to drive. It's like, doesn't matter how much gas you have, there's no car.
That's a good point, but we know that's going to change. We know it's just a matter of time before that happens.
Absolutely. I mean, folks have been writing off the season. We are not at the climatological peak yet. We're kind of in peak season now, but the official sort of climatological peak when we typically expect the most activity is September 10th. That's when we're at the sort of the top of the mountain. After September 10th, we start to come down, but you could see we're not there yet. We're kind of in the early part of peak season. We have a lot of time. So do not write off the season. Do not think we got lucky yet. As I kind of mentioned earlier, I think when we were on social media, 2022, just a few years ago, we had nothing in August, literally no named systems in the Atlantic. And then late September, things came back with a vengeance. Okay. And that was when we had Ian, which was just a generational historic impact for the west coast of Florida. That was a year where August, just nothing happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got to keep our eyes out on that. Hey, let's switch gears for a little bit. We're going to head on over to Tracy. We're going to talk a little bit more about our weather and wellness for today.
Yeah, guys, a lot of the country has felt fall-like temperatures this week. And if you were one of the people impacted by that cool push of air, you may have noticed your cravings for food starting to change. And that often happens when we get these cold pushes of air. So your body uses more energy in cooler temperatures. So even subtle temperature shifts will cause and trigger your calorie demand to want more food, more heartier food. You kind of go for the carbs then. And psychologically, you start to think, hey, it's winter, it's that storage season. So you kind of start to crave more of the heavy pastas and soups and things that keep you warm. So it is definitely something that has been scientifically proven. So you may have felt that this week. I don't know, Jim and Josh, if you've noticed any different cravings for you, but I know you guys didn't get impacted by that cooler air too dramatically.
Not really, although pumpkin spice, I believe, is the hottest thing that people are wanting to eat right now. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're right on.
Oh, it's like mice in the house, seeing all those pumpkin spice things coming up on social media. It's like, come on, guys, it's still summer. But I do want to say I've noticed that, Tracy, that when it does get cooler is that definitely my what I'm craving food wise absolutely changes. It's so funny how we're wired that way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, I noticed it a little bit as well, but things are going to be changing. So, want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Katrina because we're coming up on the anniversary.
On Sunday, August 28th, 2005, at 10:11 a.m., the National Weather Service Weather Forecast Office at New Orleans issued the following statement. Most of the area will be uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps longer. Airborne debris will be widespread. Persons, pets, livestock exposed to the winds will face certain death if struck. Power outages will last for weeks. Water shortages will make human suffering incredible by modern standards.
You know, when we see those images, it really just brings back those memories very quickly, doesn't it, Josh, about Katrina?
Absolutely. It's incredible that that was 20 years ago. Such a big event, not just for this region, but in the nation's history. So much human suffering, costliest natural disaster in American history, one of the deadliest hurricanes in many, many decades, one of the deadliest hurricanes in American history. This was just, you cannot in any way overstate the cataclysmic impact of Hurricane Katrina.
Let's bring in our national senior correspondent, Will Nunley. And Will, you also had your own personal experiences with Katrina.
Good morning to both of you. Yeah, good morning, everybody. This was my first major hurricane that I ever covered as a young journalist. We're actually in the car right now because we're headed back down there because we're going to be there in this moment, not only with the people of New Orleans, but for the people of New Orleans that left and never came back after some of this. And Dr. Jim and Josh, that's one of the stories that we're going to be focusing on in the days ahead is not only kind of revisiting some of these areas that the scars are still there. Josh, I know in the area where you live in the country, you still see foundations of homes that used to be there. And all these years later, there's nothing left but a foundation. You can still see lots of those scars around New Orleans to this day. But we're also going to talk about the lasting legacy of this storm. And one of the things that I want to point out to you is that, even though I live in a small town in Tennessee, we had at least a dozen, if not more, Hurricane Katrina refugees that moved into our area that just said, we can never go back. We had no, when I asked them today, what kept you from returning to the place that you love so much, and they certainly still do, it was the uncertainty of how long it was going to take to rebuild the area. You heard in that opening statement there just a moment ago with the National Weather Service saying it could take months, weeks and months before anything was inhabitable, and certainly that was the case. So we're going to be touching on some of those stories here in the days ahead, guys.
I can only imagine since that was your very first storm that you were covering. I mean, Josh, I think you can chime in on this too. That being your first one, that's a tough way to get going.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, another thing that made Katrina so unique was the highest storm surge on record in not just the United States, but in the Western Hemisphere. So there's no greater example of phenomenon called storm surge and just the sort of impact of it in terms of wiping out whole neighborhoods, whole communities, far inland in places. It was hard to get your head around.
Well, we're about to start on our television side again, so we're going to have just a short break. We're going to be right back here with you guys in about 10 seconds, so stay with us, everybody. All right, welcome back everyone to WeatherNation. Today on our Hurricane Hub, so far we've been talking about what happened so far with Aaron, but now we're going to switch gears just a little bit, aren't we?
Yeah, thankfully the tropics are quiet enough that we can, take a little bit of a deeper dive and look back at Katrina. That 20-year anniversary, Jim, it's coming up on us here as we get into Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I look back at it as well, this is one of the first major storms that I had covered where I was actually going to, close enough to where I could actually feel it, myself. But we weren't the only ones.
I still remember, golfing with my dad. I think it was a Sunday that this thing was barreling down on us. And I still remember some of the news coverage when I was even a young kid.
Well, and also you have to keep in mind that there are still people whose lives have never been the same since then. So the hurricane came, they either moved or they are still trying to recover at this point. So joining us, we have our senior national correspondent, Will Nunley is here, Josh Morgerman's here, Tracy Anthony is with us as well. And we're going to be taking a look at all these different angles from the storm.
Yeah, and wanted to kind of talk to Jim, get his expertise on things, Josh as well, and Will actually covered it. If you want to keep with us, though, again, grab that QR code as we go forward. That'll keep you on terrestrial television. Watch us on social media, though. Head over to whether it's X, Facebook, Instagram, if you've got a question for any of these three experts.
Yeah, so let's start to jump into this now and get more of that historical look at it. So Josh, from your perspective, what are the things that you remember about Katrina?
Well, approaching the Gulf Coast of the United States as a Category 5, it looked like it was going to be almost like a repeat of Camille in 1969. And we had that unbelievably sort of grave bulletin from the National Weather Service about the whole area being uninhabitable for weeks or months later. What came ashore was a little different than what we expected in the sense that the storm weakened quite a bit before landfall. So the winds were not what we were expecting. They were not Camille level winds, but it had already, before it weakened, it had piled so much of that water up already that what came ashore was gargantuan in terms of storm surge. Highest storm surge in American history, even greater than Camille's. And that was the main culprit for a lot of the destruction, especially along the Mississippi coast. That just giant storm surge from Waveland to Pascagoula to Mobile and to beyond into Pensacola. Now, that aside, I just want to point out there was also, of course, the tremendous impact in the city of New Orleans. That was actually something else that was due to levee failures, but whatever the cause of it, it was still massive water damage and massive loss of life. This was just a tremendous impact on so many levels.
Well, let's go to you now and get more of your perspective from your personal experience with the storm.
This is the storm that we reference. It's the benchmark that when we talk about major hurricanes ever since then, we slide in those comparisons to Katrina, and in many ways, there just are no comparisons to when we consider what this did, not only in the weeks follow, but its lasting legacy. And that's a bit what we're going to talk about. I'm in the car right now because we are heading down to New Orleans to spend this moment, of course, Jim, with the not only the city, but the survivors and the survivors that are scattered throughout the country as well. Because I remember I was a young reporter in Savannah, Georgia at the time, and I was not actually dispatched to the area until a couple of days after, and we could only get into about Jackson, Mississippi. That was where I was stationed. And we had the television company that I was part of at the time tried to mobilize as many reporters as we could. And I mentioned that just because it spoke to the scale of this disaster, the desperation in the first few days and really lasting days after this, and how many resources we're trying to mobilize, not only from the federal government perspective and from an emergency response perspective, but from the press trying to wrap our own heads around how far reaching this story was. Because you had, of course, New Orleans in this impact zone, but then, as you commonly see in with any hurricane situation, you have the desperation for nearby towns as people try to find resources. They try to get groceries and they try to find electricity, lodging, all those things. And so that was part of what I was covering. But even a huge part of this extended well into Jackson, Mississippi, which is where I spent a lot of my time. And we had even a considerable situation dealing in Jackson, Mississippi as fallout from this as well. This was not just, of course, a major New Orleans story, but so far-reaching for that entire region, and it's a lot to still. When we tell the story of the legacy of this storm, how many people were affected from that, how many lives were changed, and now culturally, how many people had to move out of that city and have never returned. But it is very interesting to see how their lives have continued in other areas, and this is still the storm that changed so many lives for decades to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it very well. And Josh, let's go back to you now, because you live in Bay St. Louis in Mississippi. And even there, you still see impacts from Katrina all those years ago.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the scars are still here. I mean, I want to say something. When you look at the coastal Mississippi now, it is just like a phoenix risen from the ashes. I mean, it's completely different place. Downtown Bay St. Louis basically was completely wiped away except for a few historical buildings. Now it's all built back and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, vibrant downtown, better than ever. But there are still the scars. Even near downtown, you still have in a couple places those steps to nowhere. There'll be like steps going up to like nothing, just a lot. It's still there. There are still reminders everywhere.
Well, and coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more about those types of things, and what we also don't talk a lot about is just the mental anguish that still remains from the storm.
Yeah, without a doubt. And
100%.
we'll be sharing some of those stories, Dr. Jim, here in the coming days. And we invite everybody to stay with us. Sorry, Josh, I didn't take that one there, but that is a part of what all of us here are going to be gathered to tell you those stories. And we're going to be there in New Orleans with folks as we remember this time. And we invite you to stay with us here on Weather Nation.
And click on the QR codes here to join us on our social media where we will continue the conversation, but you can also ask us your questions. All right, so we are now back live on social media, which means we can kind of go back and kind of focus on some of the things that we wanted to do more about.
I know this is a heavy topic for a lot of folks to be talking about, and as always, send us what you remember about Katrina. We want to keep that conversation going as we're coming up on a pretty memorable anniversary anytime you're hitting 20 years. But yeah, the comments are coming in. They're not necessarily tied to Katrina, but we can get into those when we find a different chance, a different alley. I know we want to keep with this Katrina talk. Yeah,
so let's go back to Josh for just a second, because you were talking about how things are still, I guess the changes that occurred from Katrina are still being felt, not just in Bay St. Louis, but all along the Gulf Coast.
Absolutely. When you look at the population of New Orleans, it still has not recovered from what it was before Katrina. I think right after the hurricane, I think the population was roughly halved. It has recovered to some degree, but not completely. And as was said earlier, the impacts were so huge. It was basically across the entire southern United States. There were basically huge migrations. There were Katrina survivors in other major cities like Houston, Baton Rouge, Atlanta, everything else. So the impacts were sociological, they were economic, they were on a grand scale, and it went so far beyond the impact zone of Southeast Louisiana, New Orleans, coastal Mississippi. This was just a huge regional, really a national event.
So, Will, let's go back to you now. Again, from your perspective, and how you, as you mentioned, not only from the coast, but even all the way into Tennessee and beyond, people are still feeling some of the impacts from that storm.
Right. And I've lived a little bit of the experience that Josh was just mentioning there, not only seeing it in cities like Atlanta, but in my small town in Tennessee, where we know these families that showed up, many of them didn't even have roots to our area. They just needed somewhere that was affordable, that was away from the chaos that was happening there in their city. And they knew in that time, many of them said, I don't know that we can ever go back, not only because we don't have a home to go back to, but because of the scar from this, the anxiety that comes, the hazards that come with living along the coast. And so there was still that fear of just not wanting to return. But so many families, hundreds of families, if not thousands, of course, have assimilated to new areas. It's been fun to, if you want to look on the bright side, to have the cultural experience that these New Orleans families have brought to our areas. But you're right, this was such a life-changing, a population-changing event for New Orleans, and we still are now seeing these families grow into their second generations in their new homes.
And Josh, I want to bring you back in, because how did Katrina really compare to Camille? That was the old high water mark back in the day. Was Hurricane Camille? How did those two compare? Did this kind of take over that top spot?
Yeah, Camille was the gold standard when I was growing up as like a hurricane nerd. Like Camille was it. In some ways, Katrina has overtaken Camille. So these were two of the worst hurricanes in American history. Both impacted basically the same general area, extreme eastern Louisiana and coastal Mississippi. Basic difference, Camille was a smaller storm. Camille was a stronger storm. So it was small, it was violent, it had much stronger winds. You talk to survivors of Camille who went through it here in coastal Mississippi where it came ashore, they say the wind in that one was much scarier. Camille also had what was a very high storm surge, and at the time was the record-breaking storm surge in the United States. Katrina, much larger hurricane, actually covered much more area. Winds not as strong, category 3 winds, but a bigger storm. And then the thing that really distinguishes Katrina was the storm surge that was not only higher than Camille's, but covered more area. Katrina was a bigger storm, so a larger section of the coast had a major storm surge. It wasn't just right where it came ashore. We had major destructive storm surge out to Pascagoula, to Mobile Bay, into the Florida Panhandle. The coverage of the massive storm surge was just unreal. So it wasn't just how high it was how much of the coast had big storm surge. There was nothing like it. And from a storm surge perspective, Katrina is absolutely 100% the benchmark, not just for the United States, but the entire Western Hemisphere.
Josh, I want to keep with you here. We got a question from Michael Johnson on Facebook, and I don't remember the track forecast or anything like that, but they mentioned that the NHC projected track, it didn't really follow that. Do you remember anything about the original forecast back then in 2005?
Yeah, initially it was going to come in much further east. It hit Florida first as a Category 1 hurricane, crossed the peninsula, ended up in the Gulf, and it was supposed to hook north kind of sharply and come into the Florida Panhandle. And then what happened was everything just kind of shifted west with the computer models. I think, 20 years later, the computer models are much more accurate. I don't know if we would have had such a sort of a misreading then. But in the end, it didn't matter because the change of track and what we saw happening, it happened far enough in advance that there was plenty of warning for Katrina, and that was the good news. It was not a surprise. Folks knew it was coming, even though in those early days it looked like it was going to take a much different track.
We've got another comment on X from Michael Boyles mentioning that the 4 feet of storm surge into Escambia Bay, 127 miles from landfall. That's just incredible. It's hard to wrap your head around something that tall and that far away from the center. Will, I want to go back to you because you mentioned that we're going to be doing some coverage with you here as we go throughout this week. Do you have any specific plans that you could let folks know about, or is it still kind of all up in the air?
Well, we're gonna move, of course, with the pace of the city, and there are going to be several, events that we're going to work to bring you. But I also want to show you the progress that has been made. The story today, and part of that's going to be able to revisit one of the largest infrastructure projects in the country's history that came as a result of that, and that was the pump and levee system that was installed after Hurricane Katrina to try to prevent a lot of this flooding tragedy from ever happening again. And also show you some of what remains, because again, you could drive throughout the city and still find these, as Josh was mentioning, steps to nowhere, these foundations that remain, entire neighborhoods that just simply never came back. But also the lasting legacy and the resiliency and the people that have stayed, the people that have rebuilt, that continue to be ambassadors for their communities to try to encourage people and those families that may have been displaced to come back, or at least keep the culture alive and with them no matter where they are. So if you have friends that are from New Orleans, you know that they are fiercely loyal to the culture of that city. It is something that is part of who they are, no matter where they live. And so we're going to continue to highlight the resiliency of so many of these survivors that have not only, worked to rebuild their own lives, but carried the spirit of New Orleans with them, no matter where they may be. So there are endless stories to tell, but it's just really important for us here at Weather Nation to be in the moment, in the city, as we remember this just absolutely history-changing hurricane.
On Facebook from Casper Gregory, one of our tried and true viewers out there. He says, with the upgrades to the levee system in the greater New Orleans area, do you think that it could survive another Katrina if it happened today? I think that's a pretty loaded question there, Will. What do you think?
Yeah, and fortunately, we have not had a major test of that. We've had a couple of scenarios, and we've covered them here on Weather Nation when we have been there when storms have approached the area. A lot of those pumps have been activated, and the few more minor tests that they have had at this point have all been positive. The system has worked as it is designed. Of course, we would hate to ever see another major test of that. But so far, the progress that has been made from all of our reporting this far has been that the pump systems, the levee systems that have been upgraded and reimagined have worked as designed.
Well, and the one thing that we just continually talk about is the change that's come from this, but also the lessons learned. As we know, at some point, we will have another storm that surprises us, I guess, in a way, like what happened with Katrina. Josh?
Absolutely. I think that the healthy approach to hurricanes on the Gulf Coast is just know that this is part of our environment here, and there's going to be more, and they're going to happen, and should just build accordingly. And I do think, from the perspective of coastal Mississippi, I do think a lot of steps have been taken to kind of make sure that we get through the next one better. One, I think that the sort of the houses that were rebuilt, the ones that were built after Katrina, are much sturdier. And also, there's a lot more attention paid to making sure that houses in sort of low-lying areas are raised. A lot of coastal Mississippi, the houses are very high. They're on pilings. They're sometimes 20 feet above the ground. You need elevators to get into some beach houses because the assumption is made that there will be other, massive storm surge events. And that's a healthy attitude. Just don't worry about hurricanes happening. Expect hurricanes to happen.
And the other thing I would add to that is that with every single storm, there's going to be different hazards. And so you really don't want to base all of your decisions on, well, because of this other storm, I'm going to do this, other than maybe just from those lessons learned. And I'm sure, Will, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, every storm is such a different story, and you don't have to be a meteorologist to understand that. You can just see not only of course, the paths that every storm takes, but as we've just talked about, what made Katrina different. Each storm has a story, and there is an inherent risk with being at the coast and being anywhere near the water that this is going to come with, and we have to just continue to try to build on those lessons. An example of that is going to be, again, the pump and levee system, but also the building codes, because we saw that even with Hurricane Ian, of the homes that made it and the homes that didn't. The homes that didn't were made in a certain time period, a certain era. And then you can see the homes that have been constructed after lessons have been learned, and they were nearly untouched. So our technology has advanced, our understanding has advanced, but it does take time, it does take money to make these enhancements over time. But certainly the lessons are being learned, and there are ways to come back, and there are ways to still make this your home. But yeah, never be unaware to the just very real hazards and real dangers of living in these areas.
And Josh, on a positive note too, I mean, you've seen this personally in and around your neighborhood, right where you are now.
Oh yeah, I mean my house is basically part of the Katrina recovery. I built my house where a house had been. My block had been completely swept away in Old Town Bay St. Louis. There was nothing left except one house on my block, and I think what's amazing is how the town has come back. If you're in downtown Bay St. Louis now, it's this vibrant, it's like a mini New Orleans. But if you look at pictures right after Katrina, there were only 3 buildings left. It looked like a lunar landscape. It was just incredible. 20 years is a lot of time to recover. As Will pointed out, we can build properly for hurricanes. Sometimes it takes more money, but there are ways to kind of build so that we can coexist. And buildings that are high enough to escape the water and that are properly engineered will get through even very severe hurricanes perfectly well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Okay, Josh and Will, thanks for joining us today. Of course, we're going to be hearing more from both of you later on this week as we talk more about Katrina. So again, thanks for being with us this morning. Okay, coming up, we're going to start to take a look at some of our other top stories here in weather. But also, don't forget, you can join us on our social media platforms. Click on that QR code. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love your questions and comments. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. Okay, on social media, we are right back right now. So, like nothing ever happened. And we're gonna, honestly, I got to tell you, Kevin, when we talk about Katrina, I tend to just feel sad. I'm still trying to get out of that.
Yeah, I don't know how you couldn't, right? With over 1,000 deaths and how much destruction that we were talking about on our social media platforms. Is if you weren't with us for that conversation, I think it was a really good one. go back through. You can always look and watch it after the fact here. But, you know, kind of want to steer us back toward more of the top weather headlines.
Directions, yes.
Getting you out the door as we get into these next couple of hours. And, you know, talking about some of the big weather headlines from not just today, the last couple of days, Jim. This is incredible what unfolded in Phoenix.
Yeah, this is a haboob. It's a massive dust storm that comes from the thunderstorms that we have this time of year, especially into the southwest. And that's rolled through, bringing in winds up to 50, 60 miles per hour. And then, of course, all that dust led to very little visibility on the roads.
Yeah, and, you know, it's one of those things that we see. It feels like about once a year. And I have absolutely nothing backing up any of that information, but I feel like, you know, being a producer once upon a time and now being on air here for a couple of years now, I guess, with the S on the plural there. Yeah, it's one of those things. Phoenix gets hit once a year. Yep. We'll see some other ones here, and you know, as soon as I say it's just once a year, we're going to get another one.
Well, and honestly, if you've ever flown from like Los Angeles to Dallas, or you know, where you're going to be flying over Arizona and New Mexico and places, you'll see them quite often. But most of the time, because there's such massive areas where there's nothing, you don't really hear about them. You know,
right.
And so what you're saying
falls
is
in the forest.
Exactly. But when you have it, when it, you know, it's going to hit Phoenix once or twice a year, and other places as well, and boy, it can make a big problem.
Yeah, I want to bring in Tracy Anthony here as you know, we continue to ask the question: if a haboob happens in the desert and no one's around to film it, does it actually happen?
Did you actually see it? Yeah, you know. And Jim and I were talking yesterday because I've never been stuck in a dust storm or a haboob. But Jim, you explained it like a snowstorm, and that made a lot of sense to me. You know, when you pull off and you're supposed to turn your lights off, because my instinct is you don't want to do that. You want to keep your lights on, but it makes a lot of sense. Now,
you don't want people following you into the dust. Yeah, that's for sure.
No, 100%.
Let's get a lowdown on the forecast.
Yeah, here across the country, we have this ridge of high pressure. That's what's, you know, helping to funnel in some of that Pacific moisture. It's helping those storms across the Intermountain West. And we've got this low across areas of the Northeast. So this is where they've felt the fall-like air. A lot of us cooling down to temperatures in the 60s and 70s for daytime highs. And we are breaking overnight record lows across the country. So from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf Coast, we've been breaking record overnight lows all week this week. So Jim and Kevin, you want to tell your family and friends to bundle up if they're out east.
Bundling up here in 50-degree weather. I mean, granted, we're loving the quiet weather here, the cool weather out into Denver, but I'd be lying if I said I couldn't feel that humidity a little bit.
Hey, I had to go buy some more sweatshirts. I didn't pack enough warm clothes from Florida. I didn't even check the forecast, so that's on me.
I just walk around in the cold. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm cold. And
you're the guy in the shorts.
I don't do anything.
Walking down the street.
It's pathetic.
Hey, let's show you a video, another one of these videos coming out of Black Rock City, Nevada. This is very similar out at Burning Man. Oh, look at that. Just having to surround your mouth with whatever you were wearing prior to, I guess.
You know, and it's also funny, officials then went around and made sure everybody knew that you need to secure your tents a little bit better, which I thought,
I mean,
the irony of that.
Sitting on it'll do it, I guess.
I don't know. You know, and I'll be honest, I mean, Burning Man, I've never really understood the appeal. I mean, I get like going out and having some fun, but I don't know. That,
it depends
that
on
doesn't look like fun to me.
It's a music festival, right? What kind of music do you think they're playing?
You know,
there?
I don't know. I have no idea. That's why I'm uneducated when it comes to it. I imagine there's something gets burned at some point, which I mean, you know, then you hear about that as well. So that kind of sounds like fun.
Well, hey, we talked about something that we do know a little bit more about, or at least the people that we do know a little bit more about. The National Weather Service office in Reno out there, and they dealt with the forecast for this. Listen to what they had to say.
It's right out on the playa, which is a really large desert sink. It was a former lake bed, I mean, many, many years ago. And it is actually surrounded by mountains around it. So where the event is located, it's very flat. The flat floor is covered with this alkali dust. It's this really fine dust that does not take a whole lot of wind to begin to get lofted into the air. So if you start bringing in 40 and 50 mile an hour winds out of thunderstorms, my goodness, what you're seeing on that screen there is what can result.
Yeah, my goodness. That's, you know, when you hear a meteorologist or forecasters say, oh my goodness, or oh no, or oh my, usually it's not a good thing, just so you know. Hey, let's get back to Tracy now, because what was causing these dust storms were actually thunderstorms, and it looks like we may have more of that.
Yeah, you know, a lot of you out across the West probably waking up to some scattered rain showers. A lot of that moisture has started to lift farther north. So the Northwest areas like Idaho, Wyoming, even into Washington, getting some scattered showers here to start the day. And Oklahoma, this is going to be an area that we're watching. This is day 3 of morning showers. So their ground is already pretty saturated, you guys, and they are likely to have the potential for more flooding this afternoon and evening.
All right, Tracy, always good information. You know, we're going to be watching out for all sorts of things here as we get into the next couple of days. Thankfully, pretty quiet out there as we go forward. Hey, you know, a good reminder, join us on social media. We will always keep this conversation going, whether, you know, we're live or not. Scan that QR code there.
We'll be there.
We'll be there in a matter of seconds, as it were.
We're
on social media
right now, as a matter of fact, which is really fun. I think we're going to go back to Tracy and kind of get a little bit more information on the radar and what's happening out there currently across the country. And you know, it's in the morning hours, and we still have some showers, but we expect to see things kind of firing up a little bit more later on this afternoon.
It will definitely be more widespread this afternoon. So radar is, you know, there's some showers out there, but it's relatively tame. So it's pretty isolated in nature, where we do have a few rumbles of thunder and some storms. We did have a flash flood warning across New Mexico. That has been dropped, so the storm's cleared there. But we still have a flash flood warning in southern Utah. Now, these will probably be likely into the afternoon, because we could have pretty impressive rainfall rates out west. So other than that, most of us pretty calm, quiet. If you're around the Great Lakes, though, you're going to want to grab a jacket this morning.
You know, travel's only picking up from here, Jim, as we get into these next couple of days. Big old holiday weekend out there upcoming.
Yeah, the unofficial end of summer. So a lot of people are going to be traveling. They're going to do outdoor activities. And crying a little bit. Although a lot of people celebrate, because autumn, you know, when fall starts to arrive, even though, you know, we're not quite there yet, but autumn starts earlier up north, you know, as we know. And so for me, I do love fall. So
I don't hate it. I just know it's one of these things where going into spring, I feel like I'm in a better mood, because I know, hey, it's at least going to be warm. Going into autumn, it's more of like eventually we're getting into winter, and it's closer, not farther away.
And my problem is that not only that, but the fact that the rest of the year it's over. You know, because you get boom, it's Halloween, boom, it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then I'm working on my taxes.
Before you know it, all of a sudden it's tax season out there.
Yeah.
Pass.
Let us know. Yeah, let us know about that. How do you feel about your taxes? No, you don't have to.
You could.
Weather and taxes.
We could probably guess, though.
Yeah, I think we could too. Hey, everybody! Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you being here with us, and of course, we're going to do this again, because we love doing the Hurricane Hub and talking to you at the same time. And Kevin, it's been fun being with you too.
Yeah, as always. We'll see you next week.